I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, welcome back, or welcome to the show. I'm going to be honest with everybody out there right now. As we start, I don't feel great. I don't know if you can't tell. I don't sound very good either. The seasons change. Time passes by. Well, when the seasons change, I kind of always have one of these episodes, it seems like. And so you have to forgive me. I don't feel great. Head is all clogged. Don't, have a lot of congestion. So forgive me for the way I sound and the way I feel. I'm also really not in the mood to put up with any ridiculousness from the left. And yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. Thank you so much for being with us. It is Johnny Cash Friday. We will listen to as much Cash music as we can while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. The big interview that we have coming up for you today, and which is one of the reasons why I made sure I came in and didn't stay in bed this morning, was Congressman Rick Crawford. We will be talking to him live coming up at 7:33. It's always great to have him on, and we haven't had a chance to talk to him since he went on Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock and, said that the Chinese are not our friends. They're not here to help us, that we can't trust them. He said that multiple times or variations of that on this program before, but we're going to get an update, also get an update on, what the Democrats are doing, this situation with the whistleblower. He's on the House Intel Committee, so he knows all the stuff that Adam Schiff is doing, and the reasons Adam Schiff should step down because of how he's mischaracterizing things. We're going to talk about the White House letter, the letter that was sent to the committee saying, I'm not going to comply with anything because you guys will not allow an open inquiry into the impeachment process. You've hijacked it. It's just a political move. You will not allow me to present evidence. You won't to present our witnesses. You won't actually have a formal impeachment vote, which is the precedent for the other times we've done this, the rare times that we've done impeachment. So we're going to talk to Congressman Rick Crawford about that today, and so you want to stay tuned, 7:33. Now, I got a lot to get to. We've got some Arkansas news we got to talk about, but I want to start here because, there are people on the right who are mad. They're upset. They're just absolutely outraged that Donald Trump would pull our troops out of Syria and try to end these endless wars in the Middle East. And there's all this stuff, people standing up for the Syrian Kurds. It is a note, the Syrian Kurds are different than the Iraqi Kurds. These Syrian Kurds are way more totalitarian. But, that's neither here nor there, okay? I think it's a point to make, but here's the bottom line. President of the United States, I think, represents the American people, and that's why we have a national election to choose who our president's going to be. He's the only one where we have a national election for this one guy. And does anybody remember the South Park movie a long time ago? The South Park creators. Look, I know it's a crude show. I've been watching since I was in the 7th grade. Yeah, it's extremely crude. But these guys are libertarians, and they recently came out with an episode that was very prophetic last week that talked about the NBA, or talked about selling out to China. Actually had that Harden guy from the Houston Rockets on the plane. It's amazing. Now, of course, they're supporting China, and they're bowing down to the communist Chinese. They made a movie a long time ago called Team America, World Police. This was something that the left agreed on. They were critical of George W. Bush. They were critical of getting involved in these quagmires in the Middle East. They didn't appreciate our soldiers just going to war so willy-nilly, that their lives were just thought of as being so expendable that it was our job to not fight wars in the world, but to be a police force in the world. And this used to be something the left agreed on, but now that the president is taking this as his issue, which is a populist issue, there are polls out that the majority of Americans agree that we don't need to be involved in this. And the way I see it is, there was this congressman from Illinois or Ohio I heard on the news on the way in, and he was like, we've lost 17 men, Americans over there, but the Kurds have lost 10,000. Okay, all right. But I feel like that's not even an apt comparison because we're talking about Americans. And I think this is how the president sees this. And I think this is how an American president should see this. I think as an American president, your default position when it comes to sacrificing American soldiers is that I don't care how many other people from other countries who are not Americans die, it's not worth the life, or let's say it's likely not worth the life of even one American soldier. This was the mentality of Truman when he dropped the bomb. We could have taken those Japanese islands one by one by one. It would have come at great cost to us. And so you start rationalizing that. You're saying, no, you know what? We'll just drop these bombs. Yes, we're gonna devastate the country. Yes, we're gonna kill civilians, but it's not worth one more American life. That's the default position. And if the troops are not as expendable, then it's going to cause you to be slower to go to war. But when you do, you bring hell with you. And that's the shift that's being made right now, I believe, to American foreign policy. And I think it's one that we're not actually talking about. We're not actually talking about the fact that as an American president, ideally, I believe you want your president to say, for now, where I am is that it's not worth one American life. Now and then you start there, okay? And that needle can move, but it depends, right? It depends on the circumstances. Is it a just war? What is the end game? We were only supposed to be in Syria for 30 days. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not that you never say, you know what, yes, American soldiers' lives, we're going to risk losing American soldiers' lives. It's not that you never get there. It's just that at some point, you've got to pull back and reset and start to look at what is really worth it and what's not worth it. And I think that's what the president has done. And the left just hates him for it because he stole their girlfriend, this issue of a girlfriend, That's what happened. Somebody said that a while back about the diplomacy. We were talking about diplomacy in North Korea and not going to war. And somebody on our Facebook feed, I can't remember, said, they're just mad Trump stole their girlfriend. And I've kept using that line because that's exactly what he's done. So with the blue-collar workers, he stole their girlfriend. With trying to do peace in North Korea and not go to war, he stole their girlfriend. And they get mad at him. And now here in Syria, he's trying to end these quagmires, these forever wars in the Middle East. And don't make no mistake, our foreign policy is still going to be, if ISIS shows its head, if, we're going to go over there, bomb you back to the Stone Age and come home. That's still going to happen. We're going to probably, I don't necessarily rule out, I know Turkey's a NATO ally, but I think this is going to put NATO in a precarious situation. I think now that we've pulled out and Turkey's doing what it's doing, there's going to be some people start to think, why is Turkey a member of NATO? And I don't think Turkey should be a member of NATO. I think many of you out there, you know what I mean? I've said this for a long time. But if they've been fighting each other for 200 years, why do we want to get involved in that unless it has a direct interest in us and for us? And anyway, and I'm not a military guy. Obviously, I'm not. I didn't have the courage to go to the military. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But it is clear with the outrage of Washington, D.C., that many of our politicians, when they go and campaign, they hear us talk about our disdain for perpetual war, and they just give us lip service. We have a guy in the White House representing us who is actually listening and saying, I hear you. Let's end perpetual wars that just never end. And the establishment hate him for it. Let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. Again, I don't feel well this morning. This headline in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette: work requirement for Medicaid came with $26 million in costs. This is a big, is it coming up this week? Today, no, okay. So today's Friday, there's a 3-judge panel in the U.S. Court of Appeals, the District of Columbia, that is scheduled to hear oral arguments when it comes to whether or not Arkansas and Kentucky's work requirements, they have been stopped, right? I mean, there was a lower judge said you can't do it. The Trump administration, along with the state, is challenging that ruling, appealing it to the U.S. Court of Appeals. But there is this watchdog agency, the Government Accountability Office, and they came out and said the bulk of Arkansas's costs, $23.1 million, came from changes associated with its eligibility verification and enrollment system under a contract with Princeton, New Jersey-based E-Systems, according to the State Department of Human Services. Meaning, the work, and we said this, we said this from the beginning, the work requirements themselves, okay, they cost money because you've got to set up a bureaucracy, you've got to set up an infrastructure to figure out who's working and who's not working, who's meeting your non-work requirement. I mean, there was, and that's the other thing, like the work requirements, they didn't have a lot of teeth to them. And so there was a lot, and you can go to conduitforaction.org and check this out, but there was all these, when it came to Medicaid expansion work requirements, there was all these exemptions you had to fill out every month and go to the website and say, well, I don't have to work because I'm exempt, but you've got to continue to do this. And so this was a very, as far as the statistical situation, tallying everybody's different excuses for why they need to have free insurance that you pay for, that the taxpayers pay for, to give it to Blue Cross Blue Shield. It was a very costly endeavor. So we will be watching that, and that's no surprise. By the way, I was at the Clay County Republican Party last night. Really, really great to see everybody turn out. I appreciate you guys in Clay County. Senator Blake Johnson was there. It was good to see him. We talked about, I just did the presentation, went over the scorecard, gave him those DF&A numbers that, tally, this much in the tax cut, this much in a tax increase, and again, just telling folks, $70 million tax increase net in terms of just a dollar figure coming from the private sector back into the, the people of Arkansas back into the government. And it was great to talk to them. Really, really appreciate it. We also, have this. This is an interesting situation. A paternity suit. So there's an Arkansas twist to this Hunter Biden, Joe Biden situation. It's really mainly to do with Hunter. We talked about this last week. After initially questioning whether he'd be properly served with a paternity lawsuit, the son, former Vice President Joe Biden, is expected to drop that objection. This is a Democrat Gazette article. London Alexis Roberts of Independence County, she spent some time in Washington, D.C. Allegedly, that's where she had a romantic relationship with Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son. They conceived a child, allegedly. It looks like this suit is going to go through. The news here is, London Roberts' paternity suit filed May 28 alleges she and Biden were in a relationship. Baby Doe was born 2014. According to the July 1st article in the New Yorker, Biden has denied having sexual relations with Roberts. Roberts, 28, is asking the court to establish that Biden is the baby's biological father and order him to pay child support and provide health insurance. In September, she asked the court. Of course, we know Joe Biden has a lot of money, right? In September, she asked the court to order Biden to provide DNA. The motion for scientific testing alleged that Biden verbally admitted to the plaintiff that he is the father of the child. Biden's response was originally due next Monday. After both sides have reached an agreement, though, they've extended the deadline for a response to October 21st. Quote, we are continuing to work on settling issues. If we can agree to a DNA test, then we may not need that December hearing. Anyway, so this is moving forward in some way. They've actually been able to communicate with Hunter Biden. Trump last night at his fantastic. I mean, it was successful rally in Minneapolis. It's got Democrats freaking out. There were protesters burning MAGA hats. There's a very good chance Donald Trump could win Minnesota. The Democrats know this. And so Trump was asking where Hunter Biden was. Well, I think he's, part of where he is he's dealing with the fact that he's got a child here in Arkansas. Isn't that interesting? Obviously, we also have a report that Joe Biden, this is a big deal. So, the whistleblower that works for the CIA, that was, the speculation was from those of us on the right that this whistleblower that heard second or third-hand information, didn't hear the call himself. It was funny. Last weekend I was talking to his friend who didn't even know that. They didn't even know that the whistleblower didn't act, because all they read is, they don't understand that they're reading media reports that are lying to them. There's so many people that don't understand. They had no idea. Oh, you mean he didn't actually hear the call? No. The media acted like it did in their first hit pieces, but see, people read one headline, and then they don't read anything else. They don't follow updates. They assume that they're being told the truth. You'd be surprised how many people that have no idea that this first whistleblower actually didn't hear the call or read the transcript. It was all hearsay, first, secondhand information, and that's how he made the complaint. He's a CIA officer. Those of us on the right believe that the CIA, which is known for interfering in governments, are trying to do to Donald Trump what the FBI failed to do with the Russian collusion hoax. I think it's all kind of one big cesspool, though. CIA, FBI, what they were doing in the Ukraine is what they're really upset about. And now we find out, according to this report from the Washington Examiner, that Joe Biden used to work with the whistleblower when he was vice president. So this same CIA agent who was assigned to the White House used to be assigned to Joe Biden. And we also know, according to one report, I saw Jack Posniak tweet this, that this CIA whistleblower was actually in Ukraine with Joe Biden on Air Force Two. And now everything starts to become clear. The whistleblower, aka CIA agent, may really have a lot of not just political loyalty to Joe Biden, but he might be looking out for the agency's interests in Ukraine that affect him personally. Because if you know anything about what's been going on in Ukraine, if you remember when Russia invaded Crimea and all of that stuff, the United States essentially put a different president in Ukraine. Go back and look it up. We put a guy in who was loyal to the United States interest. And at that time, U.S. interest means Barack Obama and Joe Biden's interests, right? Unbelievable. Really, really relentless deception and projection going on, which has been our board all week. Relentless deception and projection. They are constantly, the media is deceiving. The Democrats are projecting the very thing that they're guilty of. And, I never thought, you remember the interview that we did earlier? It's probably my favorite interview that we did this week with Mr. Giles, Doug Giles, who wrote that book with that very controversial title. We're just asking the question, would Jesus vote for Trump? We may have to listen to that. Today, because I thought it was really, really good stuff. The idea of a courageous leader who isn't perfect. We're going to take a break. We also have today the Arkansas House caucus meeting where they will consider voting for the removal of State Representative Mickey Gates. Conduit News on our platforms will carry that for you. It's supposed to start at noon today, where they will be voting to expel State Representative Mickey Gates. We will have that for you broadcast on YouTube and Facebook and conduitnews.com starting around 12 o'clock today. according to the schedule on the Arkansas Legislature's website. We're going to take a break and be back in a moment. All right, folks, hey, welcome back to the program this morning. We do have a special treat. We got on the line Conduit News contributor Hannah Webb Howard is back with us. Hannah, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Paul. It's always good to be with you, so I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. It's always good to be, have you on the program. So first of all, how's law school going? Law school going good for you?
So law school is an interesting beast, but we're surviving. Every day is new, and you have to take it one day at a time. So as of right now, my head is barely above water, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So we're making it.
A lot of studying going on. Let me ask you this. As a law school student, do you have as much time to, look at the headlines in depth?
Absolutely not. So that one of the things about law school is it's a hazing thing. And so, they prepare you for the worst of the worst. And right now, so the saying is the first year they scare you to death, the second year they work you to death, and the third year they bore you to death. So that's the saying for law school. And so I'm in my second year, which means they work you to death. And so that means I go to school 15 hours a week, I work 20 hours a week, and then you're supposed to study somewhere in there. And so you can imagine how my days go. Basically, you hit the ground running first thing in the morning, and you don't stop till you go to bed. And so the news that I get is normally a headline that pops up on my Fox News app. So, just a little notification and maybe a quick brush through that news feed. And that's about all that I have time to really invest in daily. If I want to do anything beyond that, I either listen to Conduit. So I listen to the podcast on Conduit. I'll plug the podcast for you. That's what I listen to because I normally listen to it either in my car or maybe while I'm getting ready, which isn't necessarily from 6 to 8 a.m.
Yeah, of course.
And so I will listen to either you or I listen to the Ben Shapiro show sometimes. And that is normally the extent of in-depth news that I get these days, and it's normally in kind of fragmented, 30-minute segments on a drive.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting because, I put myself out there as politically involved, and I still am, don't get me wrong. But it's funny because once you put yourself out there as, I love politics, everybody wants to know your opinion on everything. And so people will come up to me and be like, what do you think about so-and-so? I'm like, well, I probably know as much as you do because I probably read the same headline, and that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
And so, every once in a while, of course, something will pique my interest that I'll go a little in-depth on. Of course, the impeachment. One thing everybody's talking about it. And another thing is interesting.
I'm curious about that specifically. So if you don't have the time either because you're studying, I'm sure a lot of your fellow students don't have as well. But so has this impeachment mania, has it come up? And what have you heard? I mean, are a lot of the students there, they think Donald Trump should be impeached over a phone call?
So it's really interesting. And so this has all happened at a really interesting time because I'm in constitutional law right now. And the impeachment inquiry came out during our study of the presidential power, the Article 3 presidential power and Congress's power to impeach. So not that that's relevant to our discussion, but it's really interesting how as a whole, like my entire class, kind of has a whole new perspective on it because we've actually learned the constitutionality behind what's going on. So there's been discussions in class about it because, it's a relevant topic about what we're discussing. And they're not really political talks. They're more of, granted, that teacher is notably very liberal. However, he does do a good job of keeping it out of his discussion. So that's not a criticism on him. And I think he kind of goes above and beyond to keep it non-political, strictly textual.
That's good.
But, of course, with me kind of putting myself out there politically, and when I say that, that doesn't mean I run around looking crazy, I love politics. I honestly don't know how people know I'm so involved in politics other than just social media maybe. But nonetheless, they do. And so I think that means that anybody who's liberal doesn't want to talk to me about those things. So I don't have discussions with, these crazy far right or crazy far left liberals that you hear about. That doesn't mean they don't exist, because they absolutely do. And I think it's emphasized a little bit in law school because, I mean, we're discussing the law and policy every day. So, of course, all that's inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
But those people don't necessarily seek me out to have a discussion like that with, just, passing each other in the hallway. And my immediate friend group, for whatever reason, not intentionally, believes the way I do about politics. And so if anything, let that be an encouragement that there are more people like me out there who believe the way I do. And I'm sure there's some psychological reason why we're attracted to each other, like attracts to like. And so, amongst my friend group, we all agree. The Democrats handed us the election. This is ridiculous. They're hurting themselves. And seriously, Paul, it's come out recently that, there's a second whistleblower that may have had firsthand knowledge of the call. I am so annoyed at this point. I don't even want to go research, because I'm like, listen, I don't care. You don't have a claim. This is ridiculous. We all read the transcript. Like, he is a president. He is allowed to call another leader. It's ridiculous. And so that's how we feel. We're so sick of it. We're so sick of it.
Yeah.
I don't even want to go research it, because I don't want to hear about it anymore. Like, give it up. If we all know how it's going to end, just give it up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how me and my friend group feel about it. But I did have a really interesting conversation with a girl that I go to school with, and she, of course, came up to me. So, Hannah, you like politics. How do you feel about impeachment? Because, that's how all these conversations go. And, I told her, I said, I really probably don't know much more than you do, but here's how I feel. And, went through everything we just went through. And she said, well, here's the thing. She said, I am an independent. She said, I don't necessarily identify with either group. She said, but I do feel like I would vote for a really solid, moderate Democrat. And I was like, okay. And meaning as there's not really a moderate Democrat in the race that she feels she can support. So that's kind of the context of her political beliefs.
Creepy Uncle Joe, but he's not really a moderate.
Yeah, right. And so, but on the flip side of that, she is a staunch supporter of Second Amendment rights. She, has no issue with guns. She enjoys, shooting guns. She owns guns. Great. She doesn't want the government to touch it. And she also made the comment, I just want the government to stay out of my life. And I said, I told her, I said, very interesting how much, our ideas align. Because, all these conversations, of course, they all sound very conservative. They just don't understand that they sound conservative.
They don't, do they? Yeah, you got to get people to realize that the mainstream media demonizing the message of the right and conservatism, and yet if that's all they hear, then they think that President Trump should be impeached for a phone.
Okay, welcome back, folks. A little under the weather this Friday. Apologize for that. My immune system, I don't know what's going on. It's that the season changes, the temperature drops, and everything else. A little bit of a China update. Arkansas is very weird and conspicuous. Did you know that there was somebody on our YouTube channel? We made a separate YouTube clip where we highlighted last week that the Arkansas Democrat Party was congratulating Asa Hutchinson. They were agreeing with Asa for standing up for the impeachment inquiry, for saying that the impeachment inquiry needs to go forward, and for saying that Donald Trump's phone call with the Ukrainian president was, quote, unwise, end quote. And there was somebody on YouTube that was critical of supporting Asa and critical of me and the things I'm saying here, critical of Conduit. And I just thought, wow, that's fascinating that are you just going to ignore the well thought out points that were in the video, which were the fact that Asa Hutchinson is agreeing with the Democrat Party of Arkansas, and that his own party head, Doyle Webb, is against this impeachment inquiry? Tom Cotton, John Bozeman, Rick Crawford, all of them, Bruce Westerman. I mean, the outlier is Governor Asa Hutchinson when it comes to impeachment. It's not everybody else. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, so if you support it, I guess you're a Democrat. I mean, and that's fine. Just be honest about it. But there's so many people that actually think, I don't know about so many. I know the majority of Americans don't support this impeachment process because, and that Fox News poll was bogus. They had under 12% independents when independents were 36% of the 2016 election. And they do a poll where they have less than 12% independents and 48% Democrats. Fox News has gone dark, folks. Fox News has gone over to the progressive leftist side when they are contracting polling agencies to and purporting it as a Fox News poll that are just completely they're completely gone. Matter of fact, if you want to know a little bit more about that Fox News poll, I found over at WayneDupree.com. They actually tell you who they used. Let's see here. They use, wait for it, Braun Research, okay? Amanda Braun is married to a woman named Elizabeth Shirley, and they are, Amanda Braun is the Braun, and so of this Braun Research. And Mrs. Braun is the Deputy Organizing Director and Training Director in the Richmond, Virginia chapter of For Our Future, a political action committee that supports progressive issues and candidates. In 2016, she was a Regional Organizing Director in Reading, Pennsylvania for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. That's who Fox News got to do their poll, folks. Less than 12% independent. And that's how they got to 50-something% want to impeach and remove Donald Trump. It's laughable. It's ridiculous. Why would Fox present that as news when it is clearly fake news? Telephone number 870-275-9799. So back to Governor Hutchinson in China. There are people that believe that they're getting this. Big tech is clearly picking sides because they think they allowed too much freedom in the 2016 election, too much freedom for you to be able to share things on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook that they consider to be fake news. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't realize it was Hillary Clinton that first came up with the phrase fake news, or at least it came from the left, and it was because when Donald Trump and the people on the right were talking about all the people surrounding Hillary Clinton that have wound up dead, when they were talking about Hillary Clinton's emails, when they were talking about, all of the scandals surrounding the Clintons, they decided to bring up this term fake news. Donald Trump hijacked it, started using it himself, and now it is the amazing phenomenon that it is. Big tech thinks they lost because you had too much freedom to share information, and you got past the arbiters and the news priests. The news clergy were bypassed, and so the temple of news, they're trying to take their power back by censoring conservatives and monitoring and fact-checking, which fact-checking used to just be unbiased reporting. And now you got to have fact-checkers. And they come up with this name fact-checkers, and it's a bogus idea, right? It's a bogus idea to have fact-check or Snopes, and they created these new ideas. People don't realize that, quote, fact checkers just used to be good reporters. And now we have these things. It was like, oh, well, Snopes said, well, PolitiFact said, and it's just ridiculous. They use that to argue from a position of authority, so they think that you are, you can't challenge them, and it's ridiculous because they're just as biased as MSNBC or, they're just as biased, okay? So Reddit, this website, Reddit, is an open source platform. Okay, well, whatever it is, Joe. Joe's like, I don't know if it's a place where people have discussions in communities, and I mean, it's no longer open source. Anyway, it's banned in China, right? So, Did you guys know that Reddit is banned in China, and yet in February of this year, Reddit was given an investment of $150 million from a communist Chinese company? Why in the world would China want to invest $150 million in a website that's banned in their own country? For propaganda, that's what. And that's what we're seeing. And China's going to do everything they can to try to tilt the scales and interfere. You know, everyone's interfering in the selection, interfering in the election. China doesn't want Donald Trump in the office, I don't think, because he's ruining their 100-year plan. Something to think about for sure. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, if you can tell, I don't feel very well this morning, but I came in specifically with the goal of interviewing Congressman Rick Crawford. He's going to be on coming up 7:30 this morning. We're going to talk everything that's been going on in D.C. We're going to talk Adam Schiff. We're going to talk whistleblower. Congressman Crawford sits on the House Intel Committee, so we will talk to him about everything that's going on, all the stuff that the Republicans are having to put up with because the Democrats are just doing a political farce. So excited to do that. My favorite interview this week. Joe, go ahead and cue this up. I want you to listen to this. My favorite interview this week was Mr. Doug Giles, who wrote a book with the controversial title, Would Jesus Vote for Trump? Listen to this interview. One of my favorites in a long time. We have with us now. This is interesting because this is a very provocative title, in my opinion. We've got Mr. Doug Giles on the line. He's the founder of ClashDaily.com, but also the co-author of a book called would Jesus vote for Trump? Jesus is the King of Kings, so, he would just assume monarch authority and would abolish the election. So what are your thoughts on, or just talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so I agree with you, man. King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's probably not going to vote for any human. However, perfect. Their hair is like Mitt Romney, because he knows that we're all creepy people that are put together with spit and mud, and we're fascinated by pizza that has cheese inside the crust. That said, from a biblical standpoint, and our book is substantial. I mean, it's 400 plus pages. Not that makes it substantial. It's but what we did do is we took 25 salient issues that, according to the pollster wizards out there, are the chief concerns of the voter when they go to the voting booth to actually pull the lever and vote for whomever. We ran Trump's policies through the sieve of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to see if they're Christian friendly. You know what, man? Trump is the believer's best buddy from a policy standpoint, and for Christians to warble on and blather about how Trump's this or he's that, from a policy standpoint, again, if you like a Judeo-Christian worldview implemented and legislated, then you got to give it to Trump, because he's trumping Reagan at this juncture, and that's not just Doug's opinion. That's the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah. No, you're right on policy, and yet, I have these, I have some friends that will say, I just don't like him. I don't like him. I had a guy tell me this weekend that he,
Who cares?
I hope he does get impeached, and I just think to myself, hang on, wait a second, maybe we have this idea of decency that has been used against the American people for so long, because we have these other politicians that have put on this cloak of decency or morality, but they've been lying to us this whole time for decades, and they're behind closed doors. They're terrible, but they're just but Trump is just, I feel like, more honest about who he is as a human being.
Yeah, for all those morons that again, that say that kind of stuff, especially if they, claim to be a Christian, Paul, I have to laugh because, first of all, great answer that you gave them. It's like, okay, so Trump commits adultery, but he tells the truth. These guys don't commit adultery because nobody wants to commit adultery with them because they're broke and they're ugly and they drive a Toyota Prius, and but they lie and gossip and slander. Okay, whatever. When Christians gave me crap, man, about supporting Trump in 2015, I hit them with this: do you support King David? Because King David committed adultery and he covered it up with this thing called murder. And then Abraham,
and that was the zenith of the kingdom of Israel, by the way. That was the zenith. That was the height. Was King David?
Yeah, he brought the Ark of the Covenant back. He he killed Goliath. He routed the Philistines. Oh, and when he brought the Ark of the Covenant back, he danced naked in front of it. Can you imagine CNN, Don Lemon tonight? Donald Trump dances naked at the National Cathedral. That's what King David did. And I guarantee that the same idiots that say, well, Donald Trump, he's too naughty, they probably sing psalms and pray the psalms.
Yeah.
And Abraham committed adultery with his maid, and he lied about being married twice, and he was a coward. Samson actually bumped uglies with a Stormy Daniels. Moses was a murderer who had a crap job, who was 80 years old, who ran from the law, and Noah got drunk and fell down naked,
Yeah.
And those are just 5, brother. 5 of the biblical heavyweights that everybody lauds, that everybody approves of, but I guarantee we splash their crap on the Daily Mail or MSNBC, they're gonna be besmirched and ridiculed just like Trump is being right now. And shame on every moronic Christian who says, well, I just don't like him as a person, and he has a naughty past. We all have naughty past, and nobody would follow any of us if somebody put a camera on us 24/7, 365 to see the junk we do, or if they got inside of our noggin to see the thoughts we think.
Yeah. We're talking.
Trump for some.
We're talking with Doug Giles. He's the co-author of a book called "Would Jesus Vote for Trump?" Giles. Would Jesus Vote for Trump? It's very interesting book. He's making incredible points here. Let me ask you this, Doug. Do you think that so much of sometimes there are people that are just like, I don't like the president. Is it because we've done a poor job of explaining what the gospel actually is that maybe some people think, and they look at some evangelicals as hypocrites for supporting the president? Is it because we've communicated that the gospel message is a list of rules and do's and don'ts, and that's the lifestyle, instead of this idea that, hey, listen, we're not perfect. That's the whole point. We're all hypocrites, and that's why we need a redeemer. That's why we need to be reconciled with God. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the underlying bottom line funky bass note of my book, Would Jesus Vote for Trump? My daughter Hannah Giles, who destroyed Acorn, Obama's claim to fame 10 years ago, she said, she pointed it out the other day, just talking to her old man. She said, listen, this is about grace. God chooses the base. He chooses the corrupt. He chooses the stuff that's not, so that he can bring the hoity-toity, so he can wreck their houses. So everybody who thinks that they deserve a political position, every party that thinks, that their poop doesn't stink, he shows them up. He brings a gruff billionaire into to the Oval Office to legislate behind the same desk where Bill boinks Monica. But to answer your question, just straight up, absolutely, man, absolutely. Because and it's not so much we've taught rules and regulation. What we've done is that we've become so politically correct that when a courageous leader shows up from a tawdry background, is that we can't even recognize that, that kind of smells, like something God would do. You get somebody that comes out of left field, but he's standing for biblical values and our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence and our Bill of Rights, and we can't even recognize that this is something that Jesus might be behind, just because he got his photograph taken in Heff's grotto and he was on the cover of Playboy, and he's been married 3 times. Well,
Yeah.
David was married 7 times, you morons. And I went to public school, and I didn't really do that good in math because I started smoking weed, Paul, when I was real young. But I think 7 is 4 more than 3 that Donald was married.
I think it is too. But, you know, because you just admitted to smoking weed, everything you just said is not credible. You know.
Yeah, of course. Hey,
go ahead.
for all the pearl clutching little never Trumpkin evangelicals that are judging Trump, good luck when you die and go toe to toe with God with your baseless estimation and your bogus misinterpretation of the Scripture. Again, Paul, and you brought it out, man. This is about grace, folks, and God uses bad people. That's the only type of people He has at His disposal to use. I know it is with me.
Yeah.
I'm a goofy moron that God knocked off his high horse on December 7th, 1983. And if anybody, that's why I don't run for office, because I, used to be a drug dealer, used to be a drunk. I don't want my past to come up because the hypocritical left and the morons on the right think that your past determines your future. When God elects people and chooses people and calls people, He gives them this thing called a second chance and a fresh slate. But it's lost on CNN and the people like Mitt Romney and the Never Trumpkin.
Yes, that is truth. You are speaking truth right now, Mr. Giles, again, co-author of this book, Would Jesus Vote for Trump? Okay, so let me also, let's kind of also try to quantify what's going on here. So I think there's a lot of people in looking at the situation today. We know the media, they do control people in a way, like they're brainwashing them in a sense, and they didn't care at all about the corruption because they weren't told about the corruption in previous administrations. They were always told that their government is decent, that their government is good. And I think what we kind of have here is a little bit of possible idolatry being exposed here. That, look, I'm okay going about my business as long as these guys, these news priests, I've called them, basically they're our modern day clergy. They can absolve you or they can condemn you based on revolving, moral wheels or standards that can change from day to day. But now that these people are telling you day in and day out, there's something wrong now. Our government's never been this bad. It's all because of this one guy. And now we're no longer decent. We're no longer good. And this security, I don't think people realize that they took so much personal security in having this false idea of the government we had to begin with. And so, what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, I tell people all the time, show me from a policy standpoint where the orange man is bad, And again, if people take notes while they watch Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow, then they're not even a squirrel turd. If they actually look at what he's implemented, from a biblical worldview standpoint, from a constitutional aspect, just look at his judge appointments, his Supreme Court appointments, his lower court appointments. Look what he's done in regards to being anti-abortion. This is the most pro-life president that we've ever seen on this planet. National security standpoint, do they want a weak America? Do they want America to be vulnerable around the planet? Trump's put us on steroids. I like it when they're like, we've got to pull out of the wars. We've got to get our boys back. All of a sudden he's like, okay, we're pulling them out of Syria. No, orange man bad. What's he doing? Listen, Trump could cure cancer, and they'd say he's putting doctors out of work. He could turn clay pigeons into mourning doves. They would say he's putting mesquite ranges out of business. He could cure blindness, and they would ridicule him for destroying Braille.
All right, welcome back to the program. We were listening to an interview I did earlier. You can get the rest of that interview with Mr. Doug Giles over at the YouTube channel. Please subscribe when you're there, Conduit News on the YouTube, and click the little bell to receive notifications. We would very much appreciate it. Fascinating interview. It is Johnny Cash Friday for our terrestrial radio affiliates, those of you listening on radio. We got to take a break for those affiliates right now, and then we're going to be back here in a moment to wrap up this hour, and we'll go into the next hour. And don't forget, we have Congressman Rick Crawford coming up at 7:33. Then later today, we have live coverage of the House caucus. The Arkansas House caucus will be considering voting to remove State Representative Mickey Gates. If they vote to remove him, it will be the first House member removed in 100 years here in the state. We'll be back in a moment. Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work that we're doing here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Go to conduitforcommerce.org right now.
Social media, maybe. But nonetheless, they do. And so I think that means that anybody who's liberal doesn't want to talk to me about those things. So I don't have discussions with, these crazy far right or crazy far left liberals that you hear about. It doesn't mean they don't exist, because they absolutely do. And I think it's emphasized a little bit in law school because, we're discussing the law and policy every day. So, of course, all that's inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
But those people don't necessarily seek me out to have a discussion like that with, just, passing each other in the hallway. And my immediate friend group, for whatever reason, not intentionally, believes the way I do about politics. And so if anything, let that be an encouragement that there are more people like me out there who believe the way I do. And I'm sure there's some psychological reason why we're attracted to each other, like attracts to like. And so, amongst my friend group, we all agree. The Democrats handed us the election. This is ridiculous. They're hurting themselves. And seriously, Paul, it's come out recently that, there's a second whistleblower that may have had firsthand knowledge of the call. I am so annoyed at this point. I don't even want to go research, because I'm like, listen, I don't care. You don't have a claim. This is ridiculous. We all read the transcript. Like, he is a president. He is allowed to call another leader. It's ridiculous. And so that's how we feel. We're so sick of it. We're so sick of it.
Yeah.
I don't even want to go research it, because I don't want to hear about it anymore. Like, give it up. If we all know how it's going to end, just give it up.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how me and my friend group feel about it. But I did have a really interesting conversation with a girl that I go to school with. And she, of course, came up to me. So, Hannah, you like politics. How do you feel about impeachment? Because, that's how all these conversations go. And, I told her,
All right, real quick, as we
really
wind up this first hour of the program, thanks so much for being with us. We want to remind you about this Trump rally that's happening in downtown Jonesboro tomorrow. It is shaping up to be a pretty big deal for those of you who live in Northeast Arkansas. The Northeast Arkansas Women for Trump are hosting a Northeast Arkansas March for Trump. Men are welcome. The MC will be State Representative Dan Sullivan. There's going to be a pledge and a prayer by Alderman Bobby Long. We're going to sing the national anthem. Kaylee Sue Davidson will do that. They have a speaker, Janelle Talley-Fulmer, and the keynote speaker will be Jan Morgan. So it should be a pretty fun event tomorrow, starting at 9:30. They're going to march from 9:30 to 10:15. It's going to start on 201 East Oak Street. And then at 10:30, they'll have a rally in front of the Craighead County Courthouse. So this is in response to the, what a lot of Americans feel like is a baseless impeachment inquiry, a coup, if you will. Back in a minute.
Broadcasting from the Baker Implement Studios. Baker Implement, serving you with 11 convenient locations. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM Jonesboro.
probably don't know much more than you do, but here's how I feel. And, went through everything we just went through. And she said, well, here's the thing. She said, I am an independent. She said, I don't necessarily identify with either group. She said, but I do feel like I would vote for a really solid, moderate Democrat. And I was like, okay. And meaning as there's not really a moderate Democrat in the race that she feels she can support. So that's kind of the context of her political beliefs.
Creepy Uncle Joe. Creepy Uncle Joe, but he's not really a moderate.
Yeah. Right. And so, and on the flip side of that, she is a staunch supporter of Second Amendment rights. She, has no issue with guns. She enjoys, shooting guns. She owns guns. Great. She doesn't want the government to touch it. And she also made the comment, I just want the government to stay out of my life. And I said, and, I told her, I said, very interesting how much, our ideas align. All these conversations, of course, they all sound very conservative. They just don't understand that they sound conservative.
They don't, do they? Yeah, you got to get people to realize that the mainstream media demonizing the message of the right and conservatism, and yet if that's all they hear, then they think that President Trump should be impeached for a phone call. And then they also don't understand that we're selling liberty and freedom and being left alone over here, and most Americans still believe in that. They just are not hearing that side from the mainstream media.
That is exactly my impression of my conversation with her, is that the Republicans have been painted this big, nasty, ugly picture, and if you're not necessarily as submerged in the party as maybe someone like me, you don't understand that at the root of all this evil that we've been portrayed, it's good, solid values that everyone agrees with. It's just been so, consorted by the media.
Yeah.
And so that was the background knowledge of this girl's political beliefs and my impression of it.
Yeah.
And, she sat and listened to me about it. She said, well, here's my issue. She said, why on earth would he have this phone call right after the Russia probe? And I, again, think that's probably the product of the general consensus of the media. It's the Russia probe all over again. He is colluding with other countries to win elections.
Yeah.
When, of course, my view is he didn't do anything wrong in the Russia probe. So why would he not have a conversation with another foreign leader about an issue that he sees? That's completely appropriate because he didn't do anything wrong in Russia and he didn't do anything wrong in Ukraine.
Yeah, so it's one phony false conclusion that's leading them. The whole perspective, they don't understand that they have not been given the truth. And honestly, the ask was he's trying to get to the bottom of, and Ukraine and Australia and Italy are listening. He's trying to get to the bottom of how the Russia probe got to be a story in the first place. And
exactly.
and that's the issue. And of course he's going to do that. If the Russia probe was, this idea that Donald Trump's a KGB agent is a complete lie, it's a scam, and he's going to get to the bottom of it because he wants to expose the truth. And that's that's why he's doing all of this, and that's the real reason they're going after him, because in getting to the truth, it's going to expose all the Democrats for being liars, and some of them will be criminals, and they've got the goods on them. We're talking with Conduit contributor Hannah Webb Howard. She is in her second year of law school. She's guest hosted for the program before. Hannah, you mentioned the Second Amendment and that this particular girl you were talking to likes the Second Amendment. What about other potential lawyers who are in law school right now? Like, how do they feel about the Second Amendment?
So let me tell you, Paul, and this is all something that's cooking up in the works. So me and a group of other second-year law school students are forming a new student organization called the Second Amendment Society. And so that's all in the works. When you start a student organization at school, you have to draft a constitution, you have to draft bylaws, you have to gain enough support, start your group. And so that's the stage we're in. Our constitution and our bylaws have been approved. We've had no pushback from the administration. Not that I thought that we would. Just as a general consensus, most professors in administration at a law school are more or less leaning. And that's, not that that's okay. That's just the general consensus, and I'm okay with that. And I didn't expect to have any issues to get the group approved by them. But we didn't, and so that's good. That's encouraging.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello. Welcome to the program. Hour number 2. Thank you so much for being with us. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford, 7:33. You do not want to miss this. It's always great to have him on, but with everything that's going on in Washington, I said we're going to talk all things D.C. Somebody on Facebook was like, if you do that, we'll be here till Christmas. We're going to be talking about what's been going on. Congressman Crawford sitting on that House Intel Committee with Devin Nunes. But right now, Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff is, pulling a lot of funny business. So we'll talk about that. Last hour, we talked about how the Government Accountability Office did kind of an audit of the Arkansas Works program and said that the work requirement implementation cost $26 million to set up the bureaucracy and infrastructure to do it. We also talked about Hunter Biden and the apparent child he fathered with an Arkansas woman from Independence County and how that paternity suit seems to be going further. We also talked about last hour how Joe Biden, according to this report, the whistleblower, not only was he CIA, but he worked with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the guy he had a professional relationship with. He worked with Joe Biden as a CIA agent when he was vice president and might have even been on Air Force Two when Joe Biden went to the Ukraine, which makes this whole thing ridiculous when it comes to treating this guy as a credible witness. Because it looks like he's probably protecting himself from some of the things that he witnessed while he was in Ukraine. Yesterday, we told you about a Arkansas, Utah, and Arizona lawyer by the name of Paul Peterson, who has been indicted in the Western District of Arkansas by Dwayne Dak Keese. He was running a human trafficking baby mill where he would entice women from the Marshallese or the Marshall Islands. These Marshallese women would come here very pregnant, and they were promised they would get money, $10,000. Some of them only got $4 or $6 to deliver their babies here and then give them up for adoption to Northwest Arkansas parents. 9 out of 10 adoptions in Washington County, according to reports, are Marshallese children. This is extremely weird. I think there's way more to this story that we don't know, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. This guy is a Maricopa County, Arizona assessor. He's been called on to resign in Maricopa County, and he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which explains the Utah connection. He's made millions of dollars off of a baby mill. And Dwayne Dak Keese said this is human trafficking. This is what this guy has been engaged in. Many people are also saying that they manipulated some of these women from the Marshall Islands because in their culture, when they give a baby up for adoption, they are still going to be a part of that child's life. So the idea is that the language barrier, many of these women didn't really know that that in America and in Arkansas, you lose your rights as a parent. They go to the adoptive parent. And so there's a lot of questions right now. And we now have 13 pregnant Marshallese women who are in Arkansas right now who were basically on deck. They were waiting on deck to be the next transaction. This guy's now been arrested, this attorney who was doing the adoption paperwork, who was facilitating the arrangement between the parents and the kids and the mother. So now we have 13 pregnant women who are just kind of in some sort of adoptive purgatory. I don't know what to call it. And we also have 13, if you've got 13 pregnant women who are in limbo, you also have 13 couples who've been trying to adopt these kids. They're wondering what's going on as well. So now we have 13 couples have now filed suit in Washington County, according to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, after this Paul Peterson, this human trafficker, was arrested Tuesday, or this apparent human trafficker. Quote, there are a lot of frightened mothers out there who are expecting. This is Joshua Bryan of Rogers, who's a longtime advocate for overhauling adoption and an attorney for the couples who are wondering where their kids are, or where they're, what's going to happen to the mothers and what's going to happen to the children. There are a lot of frightened adoptive parents who are looking forward to adding to their families and wondering if they have had a failed adoption. Well, yeah, I think that's likely at this point, at what point, I'm just wondering, because this is a federal lawsuit, is the federal government going to put these women back on planes and send them home with their children? There's something really weird about this whole thing, but I kind of think the federal government should take these 13 pregnant women, put them on a plane, and send them back to the Marshall Islands and say, sorry. At this point, there has been no adoption. There's not these children are not 2, 3, 4 years old. This scam's been going on since we know of 2014. The Marshallese government, apparently, they've got a guy who was on the ground, a U.S. citizen, who's on the ground in the Marshall Islands, who is facilitating all of this. Kind of recruiting these women to be trafficked. So I kind of feel like, I know there are parents out there who want to adopt children, and that's very it's very unfortunate. I was talking to some friends about this. I don't understand. I'm sure there may be some level of naivete on the parents, on adoptive parents. But if I was going to adopt a child, you got to think at some point, if you go to this attorney, what's his pitch? What do they say in that first meeting? Like, oh man, I got the inside track on Marshallese children. Wait, what? That's kind of weird. What do you say as an adoptive parent? Again, I'm not an adoptive parent. Me and my wife never seriously considered adopting. We never actually looked into what the process is. I know it can be very expensive. I get that. So, that's why you have these parents paying $40,000 to this attorney per baby. I get all of that. But, I don't know. So I think there'd be, for me, I would assume there'd be red flags going off. Wait a second. You mean to tell me that like, we're not waiting for an adoption the normal way. We've got the inside track to get a child because we just really want a child that bad. So we're going to use this attorney who has a human trafficking. And maybe they wouldn't have described it that way. They'd probably be like, oh, no, it's not human trafficking. It's just we're paying Marshallese women to fly here, and we put them up, and we, after their baby's born, we take it and we give it to you. And it's just a simple transaction, no big deal. I guess I could see how some parents would justify that. But wouldn't the parents know what's going on? I'm asking, honestly, I don't know. Was this in any way concealed from the parents? It certainly wasn't concealed from the judges in Washington and Benton County, who apparently, according to reports for years, have been like, why are we adopting so many Marshallese children? Like, what's going on? Why are so many Marshallese kids, like, why are 9 out of every 10 adoptions in our counties from people who are not from here? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you do with these 13 remaining mothers who are pregnant, waiting to give birth. I don't know what you do with these 13 couples who are trying to get these children. I have no idea. It is a quagmire. Apparently, they're saying that the office of Dak Keese, the U.S. attorney, they're going to have more advice or, more information about what's going to happen next concerning this later today, is what was reported. Let me know what you think about this case. 870-275-9799. I love the Babylon Bee. It is a satirical website. This was their headline 2 days ago. NBA now requiring all players to stand for the Chinese national anthem. New York, New York. In an effort to salvage its relationship with China, the NBA is now requiring all players to stand for the Chinese national anthem at the beginning of every game. The official song of the People's Republic of China, March of the Volunteers, will be played at the start of all professional basketball games, whether at home or abroad. All players, fans, coaches, and employees will be required to stand and solemnly sing lyrics, including the following. Quote, millions of but one heart we run toward the communist tomorrow. Build our homeland, guard our homeland, and fight gallantly. March on, march on, march on. We, for tens of thousands of generations to come, hold high the flag of Mao Zedong. March on. Quote, we hope this gesture of goodwill will show China that we love them, and there is no need for a multi-billion-dollar deal to fall through, said NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. March on, Mao. Silver then performed a soft jazz rendition of the tune and bowed low to the ground to show President Xi Jinping that he is very, very sorry. Also, anyone who does not comply will be shot. A beloved Chinese custom that should further smooth things over with the authoritarian regime. I'm also told that Governor Asa Hutchinson read this story and, he didn't know it was a satire website. He thought it was true and, was okay with it. That's just a joke. See, I'm just joking. No, seriously, though, Asa Hutchinson in China, what's going on with that relationship? That's weird. What is going on with Asa Hutchinson in China? Anyway, all right. Let's see here. Todd Starnes. Did you guys hear about this? I had no idea. Beto O'Rourke he's a fake Mexican. He's a fourth-generation Irish-American pretending to be a Hispanic. Beto O'Rourke, right? Okay. So, Todd Starnes, Fox News, this headline, this flew under the radar. Beto says churches who oppose same-sex marriage will lose tax-exempt status. This is what many people in the Christian church have been, just so you know, have been not looking forward to, but expecting, let's just say, for a long, long time. We all knew this is where it was going to go, right? Because the Bible is going to offend any culture that the biblical Christianity is going to offend culture regardless, different aspects, but I mean, it just is. But this is still something that should concern all of us because this is still America and we still have something called the First Amendment. But the totalitarian left, they don't just want you to tolerate living amongst people that you may have disagreements with. You have to heartily, as Romans 1 talks about, you need to heartily approve of practices. They want your thoughts. Don't you understand how totalitarian they are? You see, you have people on the left who are begging for legitimacy. They want their lifestyles. They're not confident that they can, not all of them, but they're not confident that they can personally be okay. It's like, well, I'm okay with it. They want other people to affirm them. They want other people, and they turn to the government to not only affirm them and petitioning the Supreme Court saying that marriage is a constitutional right, which it's not. Marriage is not in the Constitution. That's preposterous to say that it is. But they've turned to the government, and the Supreme Court has affirmed them. And it's like, okay, fine. That's a victory for the left, the LGBT RSTLNE, would you like to buy Val community? That's a victory for you. Okay, got it. Moving on. Now, it's more than that, though. Not just about victories. Now, the thing that I'm assuming is nagging at them is the fact that there are still people living in America that in their homes believe differently. In their churches believe differently. They just believe in living a different way. Not that they want to stop you from marrying another man or marrying a woman, or not they want to stop. They don't want to know what's going on in your bedroom. They don't want to, but they just believe differently. They still speak, would still get along in public, would still speak to each other, would still help each other out if we see somebody in need. No. But if you really think in the back of your mind that my lifestyle is a sin, or you're raising your kids to believe that what the Bible says is true, well, we've got to do something to you. And make no mistake, this is the opposite of what our country's about. It's the opposite of freedom. It is totalitarian. It is fascism. They are demanding loyalty. They are demanding that they can't even stand the thought of your thoughts that you keep to yourself even, or that you might discuss when you're going through Scripture with fellow people, fellow believers that think like you do. They don't even want that to happen. I'm not saying this is everybody on the left. I'm just saying this is the movement. Because in Beto O'Rourke, I'm so thankful for Beto O'Rourke. He is doing the Democrats a terrible disservice because he's actually being honest about what their plans are. Okay? Quote, hell yes, we're going to take your guns. They're coming for your guns. That's what the Democrats, that's what we've always said. They really want to just disarm us. No, we don't want to disarm us. We just want common sense gun control. We just want common sense gun regulations. No, you want to confiscate our weapons. So we're right. We got a guy that's actually admitting this. And now we have a guy saying, again, the same guy, that he wants to, he told this to a cheering crowd at a scene in town hall. He would revoke the tax-exempt status of any church or Christian college or charity that opposes same-sex marriage. Which is just crazy, I mean, what a totalitarian freak Beto O'Rourke is. I mean, he really is. I mean, this guy purports to be on the moral high ground, and he has no idea that he's wanting people to just ignore what they consider sacred religious texts, the Bible, what they consider what I consider to be a supernatural document, and they just want to, we want you to ignore these verses. They want to censor it. It's really sad. Then you have this tweet from CNN's Don Lemon. Do you think religious institutions like colleges, churches, charities, should they lose their tax-exempt status if they oppose same-sex marriage? People on the left are going to say, yeah. I mean, these are the same people that I talked to when Arkansas was trying to pass the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. They passed a lesser version of it, but the first one they passed had the LGBT community storming the Arkansas Capitol, and they weren't storming, but they turned out and had their signs and their tie-dye T-shirts on. And I asked one of them, I said, What about this was about, baking a cake or flour, they were saying it's discrimination. I was like, what about being a doctor? I mean, you think a doctor should be forced to have an abortion? Or I'm sorry, should be forced to perform an abortion or a medical procedure that they have a religious conviction about? And they said, yeah, he should. And if he doesn't want to be forced to do procedures that other people want to have done, then he should have thought of about that before he became a doctor. So very totalitarian, very fascist. Likewise, they also said, if a cake baker or a florist wants to have a business, then they should think about that. They should never be a cake baker if they're not. So basically, if you want to have a business, you give up all of your freedom. If you want to be a doctor, you give up all of your freedom. This is the mentality, a growing mentality on the left. And it's one that is totalitarian. And it's one that is incompatible with American society and our civil rights. We'll be back in just a moment.
And we actually have what I feel is significant support to be in such young stages of the development group or of the development stage. And so as of right now, we've only reached out to fellow second-year students, and there's a little under 100 of us in our entire class. And so far, we have 10 people committed to the group, which I feel is a huge success. Granted, that's only 10%. But, of that, there's not many people who are necessarily interested in student organizations because we're busy. You don't necessarily have the time to give to them.
Yeah.
And so that's okay. And so that plays a little bit into it. So I'm incredibly proud and encouraged of the support that we're gaining. And, of course, this is all, the notices about we're starting this group, here's what the group's about, has all been put out into the public forum, into the whole second-year class as a group. I've had no pushback if we should boycott this group, nothing like that. And the whole idea behind our group is to, of course, any law school student organization has to in some way tie back to the legal field. So our tie back will be, advocate for our values regarding Second Amendment rights. Of course, not gun control, but the exact opposite. We would like for our Second Amendment rights not to be infringed. And then as part of the social aspect of it, we would like to organize groups to go to gun ranges and things and offer an opportunity for people to either, shoot their guns at a gun range, or if you have never shot a gun in your life and you want to, hey, come shoot them with us in a controlled, safe environment.
Yeah.
Learn how to operate a handgun. Because I'm fully convinced that people oppose guns because they don't understand them.
Yeah.
They think they're scary. I grew up with guns. I don't think a thing about them. If anything,
All right, we have a couple things going on later today at 12. If you want to stay close to Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to be broadcasting. Oh, by the way, Joe, will you go ahead and create a YouTube event for this Arkansas House Caucus? The Arkansas House Caucus is going to be considering the removal of State Representative Mickey Gates today at noon. We're going to just be covering that, bringing you the video from inside the chamber on our platforms, and so make sure you stay tuned for that. And then tomorrow there is the Northeast Arkansas March for Trump, put on by the Northeast Arkansas Women for Trump. And so that's the thing that's happening. We have State Representative Dan Sullivan there, who's the MC. The keynote speaker is Jan Morgan. So don't forget about that if you are in the Northeast Arkansas area. And then coming up, we will be talking with Congressman Rick Crawford here in about 4 minutes. So please stay tuned. You are going to want to hear this just because there's all this stuff going on, and this is a direct connection that we have with Arkansas, and the fact that Congressman Crawford is on this permanent select House Intelligence Committee is a big deal. We'll get his take on what's going on with Adam Schiff, this whistleblower that, according to one report, we now know not only was he CIA, not only did he have a professional relationship with a Democrat, but that professional relationship was Joe Biden. And Joe Biden and him might have even been on Air Force Two when he was in Ukraine. So what's going on? We'll ask Congressman Crawford that and much, much more. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a moment.
Folks, as a taxpayer or business owner, I know the government rarely gives the people a break. Big government politicians seem to always want more money from us, taxpayers. So if you want to support the work that we're doing here at Conduit News, bringing you the truth, then why not consider giving less money to the government that never stops overspending and overtaxing us by giving a tax-deductible donation to Conduit for Commerce, the premier organization in Arkansas that never stops promoting small business and limited government. Just go to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Support Our Cause. From there, you can decide if you want to donate monthly or one time. Give the government that's using your tax dollars to grow and grow less, and give the people fighting for your values more. Go to conduitforcommerce.org right now.
Get the group approved by them. But we didn't, and so that's good. That's encouraging. And we actually have what I feel is significant support to be in such young stages of the development group, or of the development stage. And so as of right now, we've only reached out to fellow second-year students, and there's a little under 100 of us in our entire class. And so far, we have 10 people committed to the group, which I feel is a huge success. Granted, that's only 10%. But, of that, there's not many people who are necessarily interested in student organizations because we're busy. You don't necessarily have the time to give to them.
Yeah.
And so that's okay. And so that plays a little bit into it. So I'm incredibly proud and encouraged of the support that we're gaining. And, of course, this is all, the notices about we're starting this group. Here's what the group's about. Has all been put out into the public forum, into the whole second-year class as a group. I've had no pushback if we should boycott this group. Nothing like that. And the whole idea behind our group is to, of course, any law school student organization has to in some way tie back to the legal field. So our tie back will be, advocate for our values regarding Second Amendment rights. Of course, not gun control, but the exact opposite. We would like for our Second Amendment rights not to be infringed. And then as part of the social aspect of it, we would like to organize groups to go to gun ranges and things and offer an opportunity for people to either, shoot their guns at a gun range, or if you have never shot a gun in your life and you want to, hey, come shoot them with us in a controlled, safe environment.
Yeah.
Learn how to operate a handgun. Because I'm fully convinced that people oppose guns because they don't understand them.
Yeah.
They think they're scary. I grew up with guns. I don't think a thing about them. If anything, I feel much safer knowing that people around me have them. And I'm sure part of that is because I grew up with them. I've known how to handle a gun since I was 6, 7 years old. And that was because, I wasn't shooting some Glock something when I was 6, 7. But, my dad would take me hunting. I knew where my safety was. And so I've never been scared of a firearm. I knew how to respect them and how to operate them. And so I'm fully convinced that that's why people are
Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to go now to Congressman Rick Crawford. Been waiting for this interview all morning. It's always great to have him on Fridays. Congressman Rick Crawford, how are you this morning?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't envy you. What you guys are going through up there with Adam Schiff. You're on that committee. What can you tell us? What's your reaction with what's been going on the last couple of weeks?
Well, first off, just kind of bring it home a little bit. I was at my son's football game a week ago last night, rather. It was a week ago Thursday, and I've known these parents now for years, and our kids play football together and the whole nine, and we've never really talked politics. They just come up and just, hey, how are things in Washington? That's been kind of the extent of it. And all four sides, I'm getting it from people in the bleachers that are going, how in the world do you put up with Adam Schiff? And it's like, 3 weeks ago, nobody even knew who Adam Schiff was. And now everybody does, and they all hate him. And so the idea that somehow he's elevating himself to some, national prominence, that's a gross miscalculation on his part. But what's driving disdain for him is the fact that he's just not being honest about anything. And so the more we see about this whistleblower complaint, the more you dissect it and the more information that comes out, the more you see this is a contrived plot against the president. And now it's being reported, multiple sources are reporting this, that the whistleblower is in fact an associate of Joe Biden. And so the question then is, we already know that Adam Schiff knew who the whistleblower was well in advance. He knew about the complaint well in advance before sharing it with us on the committee. And so we have to assume that he knew that he was associated with Joe Biden. In fact, the ICIG indicated in his comments in his hearing that, in fact, he was a Democrat and identified as a Democrat and recognized that there was a potential for bias. But he didn't specify any association with a particular candidate, but there was the projection at one point that this individual was associated with a 2020 candidate. Well, the 2020 candidate in question turns out to be Joe Biden himself. So you see where we're going with this. I mean, again, this is a Steele dossier all over again. So what happens is these guys, they cook up a plan. They leak it to the media. They tell the media about it. The media runs a story, and then they cite the media story as the reason for their action. So we're seeing that all over again, and they think the American people are too stupid to figure out this playbook.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned it's the Steele dossier. Some people have said this is the, the CIA, a rogue CIA, doing what the rogue FBI couldn't do with Trump-Russia collusion. And now we do have one report saying that this CIA whistleblower, quote whistleblower, was even on the plane on Air Force Two when Joe Biden was in the Ukraine. I mean, so this could be a lot more than, there may be some personal consequences for this guy when we actually look into, what actually happened in Ukraine. And let me ask you this, Congressman Rick Crawford, were you kind of maybe not shocked, but in that transcript of that call, the media misconstrued the favor was to investigate Joe Biden. They omit 540 words in order to get to that conclusion. He was actually asking about Ukrainian corruption along with the CrowdStrike server and the hacking of the DNC. And for some reason, the media doesn't want people to know that that's what the president was asking about. What are your thoughts on that?
The reference was not to the 2020 election. The reference was to the 2016 election. If we've sat back now for the last 3 years and said there were some shenanigans in the 2016 election, and it's the president's responsibility to get to the bottom of it. So he asked about the 2016 election, and then they throw a fit about it. How dare you interfere with an election? Look, he's not interfering. He's doing what you asked him to do, and that is to find out what happened in the 2016 election so we can prevent it from happening again. Mm-hmm. There was no mention of the 2020 election. There was no mention of dirt. The mention of dirt came in the parody presentation that Adam Schiff made in the opening comments of the hearing with acting DNI Joe McGuire. When he made those comments in parody, we were flabbergasted by this, by the way. I mean, how in the world can you come and say these things and, put all kinds of subtext in there and present that as fact, and then after the fact, go, oh, well, I was just kidding. No way, no court proceeding in the world would you see that stand. And so that's the difference between a legal proceeding and what you see going on in Congress, and that is these guys, first off, the witness is sworn, but the members of Congress are not. That's a problem. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to present evidence, you should be sworn. He was attempting to present evidence, and he wasn't sworn, so therefore he wasn't bound to tell the truth. Of course, he's not bound to tell the truth anyway because he's Adam Schiff. He lies every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah.
And so, on the one hand, I don't guess we should be all that surprised about it. On the other hand, it's absolute outrage that he's using his position to try and affect the public opinion. And that's what this was about. That's the reason that the hearing was held in public. A hearing of that nature should never be held in public. So he held that hearing in public exactly for the reason to give him a platform to do this parody, and then afterward pronounce this disclaimer of, well, I was just kidding, so it's not, just relax.
Yeah.
That's entirely unacceptable. So here's the other thing people need to understand, too, about the phone call in question. First, a few things. First off, the president is not a member of the intelligence community. Further, he wasn't engaged in any type of intelligence activity. So that means that the complainant in question had no jurisdiction or no standing to offer a complaint with regard to intelligence, because this was not an intelligence operation, number one. Number two, the president's not a member of the intelligence community. Therefore, a member of the intelligence community would not file a complaint of urgent concern in the intelligence community to address something that he or she believed was a problem when it's completely out of order. I mean, how hard is this to figure out? We're not talking about, this was not a CIA operation, number one. Number two, the president is not a member of the IC. So why is this guy given standing at all?
Yeah.
And so on the front end, you've got to take this stuff serious, and you've got to say, well, look, follow the procedure. And then we find out that the procedure is flawed, and that the ICIG might have even played a role in a flawed procedure by altering the form associated with the disclosure of urgent concern. And so the more you look into this, on the front end, acting DNI Joseph McGuire said we had every reason to think this was credible because it followed the procedure. Then he goes on to say, I took the advice of DOJ counsel, who advised me that this was not an IC matter. Therefore, the ICIG had no jurisdiction. Therefore, it was not incumbent on the acting director of national intelligence to provide that report, to disclose it to the committee.
And that's why they were so. And I just want to say that's why the Democrats were so hard on him, because we now know Adam Schiff, knew who the whistleblower was and was expecting this to have already been cycled into the media narrative, and it wasn't.
Right. I'm going to tell you just touched on something too. So Adam Schiff, he's orchestrating this whole thing, and one of two things is going on. Either he is not only being deceitful and let's just be honest with it, flat out lying to the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee, but he's also lying to his colleagues on the Democrat side. So he's either lying to them as well, or they are complicit, or he's telling them everything he's doing and they're complicit. In either case, we've got a problem. One is they're complicit and they're allowing it to go on and not say anything. Or two, they didn't know what they do now and they're still not saying anything.
Yeah.
In either case, that's a problem for I would not want to be one of those Democrats who either A, knows about it in advance, has been advised of what Schiff's plan is, and is aware of everything that the committee or staff are doing, and says nothing, or two, after the fact, now it's clear, and yet they're remaining silent. In either case, that's a pretty bad position for them to be in.
It is, and now I see a headline where one of these whistleblowers now wants to testify, but only in writing, and I'm just thinking, well, that's just going to be another document that the media can distort and one-sided, and probably run the written testimony past Adam Schiff before you guys see it either.
Well, let's be honest about it. The whistleblower complaint was not like any other whistleblower complaint that we know of in the past, and the behavior of the complainant does not comport with the usual whistleblower. And the other thing is that this was basically like a legal document. I don't know if you read the complaint. It's out there in the public sphere. You can see it for yourself. I read the complaint, And not only did the complaint, it was prepared like a legal document with footnotes. Who does that except a lawyer? So that means that he had to have had legal counsel help prepare that document. Who was that legal counsel? I wonder. So and I'm not making any kind of conjecture here, but just so everybody knows, the first thing Adam Schiff did when he assumed the chairmanship of the Intelligence Committee is staff up with a ton of lawyers. So the HIPSI staff, the House Intelligence Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, or HIPSI as we call it, the HIPSI staff on the Dem side is mostly populated with attorneys. We're dealing with oversight of the intelligence community, and they are populated primarily with attorneys, some coming from an NSC background, others with absolutely no background at all in the intelligence community, and more political operatives than anything. But suffice it to say, there's a whole lot of lawyers over there. We've got them on our side, too.
Yeah.
But our staff is comprised of professional staff members who are not attorneys, but are there to help provide guidance in our oversight role and provide support in our oversight role. They've got a couple of those, too, on their side, full disclosure, but they are heavily weighted on the legal side. Well, I'm just pointing that fact out. It's interesting to note that we've got an IC whistleblower complaint that is prepared like a legal document. And, yeah, there's a whole lot of lawyers out there. Could be anybody. But the fact that we now know that the complainant in question, the whistleblower in question, was in collaboration or worked in at least in concert with, to some degree, HIPSI staff and even Adam Schiff himself, who denied having any contact with the whistleblower and then later acknowledged the fact that he did. So another lie that he was caught in. Just kind of makes you think, well, heck, there must have been some help there from someone.
Yeah.
And, so, I mean, you can connect the dots any way you want to, but that's out there.
Even the Washington Post, rated, Schiff's statement on that, gave Pinocchios. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. He's on the Intelligence Committee. He's got a lot of knowledge here, a lot of them I'm sure he can't share. I do want to talk a little bit about China, and we can go anywhere we want with this, but, a lot of people are saying with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in Ukraine, they're like, okay, now do China. And, we know what happened with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden in China. We also have a situation where, we've talked about this. You were on Roby Brock's program, Talk Business and Politics, last couple of weeks, where you said, the Chinese are not coming to Arkansas to help us. They can't be trusted. And then in the news today, Congressman Crawford, or this week, we have the revealing of how influential China has become to the NBA and to Hollywood. And it's really just sickening to see these people sell out American principles because they want that market over in China. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I think the NBA is it's important to note the role that they have in this whole cultural war, is really as much as anything is what's taking place, among other things, in a propaganda battle. But so the NBA is right there in the mix, but so is Hollywood. And here's the dirty little secret, that American businesses and American investment is so huge and important in China that there are a whole lot of folks that don't want to have this conversation. We're just too heavily invested in China to apply the same level of standards to that country as we would for any other. And I'll give you an example. We hold up all these red flags about why we don't trade with Cuba. And we don't trade with Cuba because, number one, they're communist nations. Because we don't trade with communist nations. Number two, they have an egregious human rights violation record. We don't trade with countries that have human rights violation records. Number three, they suppress the media and free speech. We don't deal with countries that suppress media and free speech. Number four, they persecute religious minorities, ethnic minorities. We don't deal with countries who do that. Oh, wait. Yeah, we do, to the tune of trillions of dollars in China. So why do we have this duplicitous stance with Cuba, but not the same standard with China? And the reason is because we don't have trillions of dollars invested in Cuba. So therefore, we have to protect our investment. I'm sick of this. I'm really so sick of these people that want to sit back and pretend that China is not an existential threat to the United States, but Cuba is. I mean, if we're going to do it, if we're going to trade with China, let's just be honest. Let's have the intellectual honesty to say, well, look, if we're willing to trade with those dirtbags, then pretty much everybody's on the table.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me about the egregious records in Saudi Arabia if you're not willing to address the egregious record in China. Don't talk to me about Pakistan if you're not willing to address China. Don't talk to me about Cuba if you're not willing to address China. And so, look, all I'm asking for is consistency. Either we're going to say who we are and what our standards are and live by that, or we're not. And that's the problem that I have with this whole China thing. And, the other thing is that at the height of the Cold War, we still had an economic relationship with the Soviet Union. Whether it was right or wrong, the fact remains that we still traded with that regime, and yet we have these different set of standards. So our ethics in the business world exists on a sliding scale. I'm willing to overlook a whole lot of crap if I can make a buck on it, is basically what they're saying. And then on this huge scale, the NBA is so invested in China that they're willing to just do whatever China says. Do you know what? The tweet went out from the Houston Rockets general manager, and they don't even have Twitter in China.
Yeah.
How many Chinese people do you think saw that tweet?
Yeah, no.
They suppress everything there. Why do you think they're doing this? Because they're exerting control in the United States. They're showing the rest of the world how much pressure they can put on the United States, and the NBA folded like a cheap lawn chair. And when you got people like Steve Kerr and Popovich who are willing to address any issue at all, except for China, we're not going to talk about that. And then you have the Houston management saying that a CNN reporter asked a question about China. Oh, no, we're only going to talk about basketball. Really? You're only going to talk about basketball? You guys have been talking about every social issue that you can find for the last 10 years, but now we're only going to talk about basketball when we address a topic that you're not comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a boycott person, but I've been really studying. The NBA was at one point, a venerable institution, and they showed exactly the complete and total lack of integrity, lack of character that they have and that they're built on, and the lack of patriotism that exists in that institution.
Yeah.
So people can make their own decisions about whether or not they want to support the NBA, but I can tell you what, it's absolutely disgusting to see. And when I remember when Chicago Bulls were dominant, and Steve Kerr was a part of that, and I thought, man, these guys are just awesome, and Steve Kerr was a great player. He is a pure coward, and I have no regard for those people.
Yeah, and they're circling the wagons with this, and it again, the Chinese have done a really good job buying off American industries. I mean, I don't know what else we can say besides, we've elected. Go ahead.
The irony of that, Paul, is that they've done it with American money, because what the underpinning of their economy is foreign direct investment. They don't invest in themselves. They don't grow their own economy. They don't build their own economy. It's not organic. It's grown and sustained by foreign direct investment. U.S. investment that's being turned, our money used against us in every form you can think, whether it's propaganda, weaponized, whether it's military hardware, weaponized, that we paid for through our foreign direct investment that's now being turned against us. When are the American people going to wake up, smell the coffee?
Yeah, and I'll just let you know real quick to comment. I know you did comment on Roby Brock's show, specifically about what Arkansas is facing, and your warning, and I think I've been trying to tell everybody about it, your warning is that we can't really trust the Chinese when they start talking about investing money here in Arkansas.
Well, look, this hits home for farmers, for example. For the last 20 years or so, Chinese have been, hinting about, well, we would like to import U.S. rice, but we want to come and take a look at your operation first. They do it all the time. They want to come in and steal everything we have. They want to take our proprietary technology. They want to take our genetic, our varietal, technology and all the other things that support the rice industry, get their hands on it and apply it in their own way. They're not here because they want to buy U.S. rice. I'd be happy to sell them U.S. rice. That's not what this is about, because every time they move the goalpost and then they have the temerity to challenge us on things like phytosanitary protocols, and then, oh, sorry, we can't buy U.S. rice because it's not up to our standards. Are you kidding? They're the most egregious violator of any kind of climate rules on the planet, and they're going to lecture us on phytosanitary protocols. My point is this. These people are not here to invest and improve in the American economy. They are here to steal everything they can and use it against us.
Yeah.
And so I cannot warm up to Chinese investment in the United States. I'm not against foreign investment in the United States per se, but I am foursquare against Chinese investment in the United States because they're not here for economic purposes. They are here to damage our economy and take what they can get to improve their own economy. And that's the bottom line, and that is the case wherever they go.
Congressman Rick
They
Crawford,
are not this magnanimous investor.
We're out of time. It's always great. I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate the service that you're doing for the state of Arkansas, sir. Have a great weekend and be safe.
Yes, sir. You too.
Okay, folks, we got to take a break. Always great to have him on. We'll have a YouTube video of this. It'll be up at the Conduit News YouTube channel or conduitnews.com. We'll be back to wrap up the show here in just a minute. Got a break for 1 minute.
They don't understand.
They're afraid. They're afraid of them. So you gotta bust the fear aspect. You gotta debunk that first. And yeah, actually handling it certainly does that. I love it, Hannah. I love that you go to law school and you start a Second Amendment society. I think that's fantastic. I'm really, really happy that you're doing that. We're running out of time here. I want to get your thoughts, though. One more thing. Did you see George Bush and Ellen at a baseball game together? And have you heard about the leftist backlash that Ellen dared to appear with George W. Bush?
I sure have heard about it, and let me tell you, I love it. So first of all, I love Ellen's show. I think it's great. She's a liberal, left Democrat. That's great. I don't care. I still love her show because it's funny. I think overall she's a good person. And so, I'm not one of these people who's going to boycott her just because she's left. And so, of course, her and George Bush were seen, I think it was at maybe a Cowboys football game together.
Okay,
they
Cowboys.
were sitting in a box together. Yeah. Right, they're sitting in a box together. She was hammered on Twitter because she dare associate with the Republicans, because she dare so associate with one. And so on Monday, in her opening statements of her...
We're going to wind things down here. One announcement, though. We'll let Johnny Cash play us out the Gospel Road. But we will be back on the air on our digital platforms, Facebook and YouTube, coming up at around noon, when the Arkansas House of Representatives will decide whether or not to remove State Representative Mickey Gates. It will be historic if they do. It'll be the first time that has happened in 100 years. How many state reps just won't vote? I had somebody tell me that the other day, yesterday as a matter of fact. Somebody be like, there may be some people that just don't vote either way because they don't want to remove somebody who was reelected in light of all the information about not paying taxes. And will Mickey Gates get to present his side of the story? That will also be interesting as well. All that coming up later today at conduitnews.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Folks, have a great weekend. Arkansas, be safe.